Who knew when Deb Brown asked me to speak at 140 Conference Des Moines for Mother's Day last year that I'd be in New York City almost a year later, well, a little over a year later. So, go me. My name is Jo Cheray. I was born in 1972 to a small-town auto mechanic and Korean war vet and a stay-at-home mom. At the age of 3, my life changed drastically forever. My parents were declared unfit due to my mother's neglect of us, and my 3 brothers and I were removed from the home. My little brother and I were frequently malnourished. The same night, in August of '75, my brothers and I were removed from the home, and my dad killed himself. 2 days later, we went to his funeral, and then we had to return to our foster parents. I spent from the age of 3 to 5 in foster homes in various small Kansas towns. We were all separated. 2 of us went to Washington, Kansas. My baby brother and I were in a foster home together briefly in Frankfort and then separated. I would also spend time on a small farm in northeast Kansas. At the age of 5, we were reunited with our grandparents and our mom in small unincorporated Baileyville, Kansas. At the age of 6, my mom decided that my grandparents had things under control in the raising of us and ditched us for a piece of tail and abandoned us, leaving us with our grandparents. At age 10, my grandfather, who was physically abusing me, began to also sexually abuse me. Physical abuse included, but was not limited to, being whipped with a bullwhip, thrown around my room like a rag doll, and once he beat me until I almost urinated myself. Throw into that mix the emotional abuse. The sexual abuse started as fondling and moved into oral sex. He had already been physically and emotionally abusing me between the ages of 7 and 10. During this time, I attempted suicide twice and tried to run away a couple of times. Running away never worked because my grandfather controlled the whole county and everybody was pretty much his eyes and ears. The last straw was at the age of 15 when I discovered my pubescent brothers had been going into my room, and I vehemently stated no one was allowed in my room. My grandfather went off and called me a bitch, a whore, and a slut, and told me he could go in my room anytime he felt like it. He ransacked my room, tearing my curtains off my windows, turning my bed upside down, and taking all my drawers out of my dresser, then dumping my clothes out. After I was done hanging up laundry, I had to go clean up my room. After he'd fallen asleep after Sunday dinner, I lied to my grandma and told her I was going to bike the back roads. Instead, I biked to nearby Seneca, Kansas, and found my high school counselor. I told her I was not going back home and that I would kill myself or her before I went back home. I would spend the next 6 months in a foster home about 3 to 5 miles from small town Bern, Kansas. In July of that year, I went to live with my mom, who I thought by then had had her act together and was living in Topeka, Kansas. I wish that I could say life was happily ever after and getting out of the hell on earth I was living in, but with it brought future relationship issues and challenges. I ended up in and out of temporary living situations, being homeless for a bit, and going back into a foster home. I had already found my first abuser by the time I was 18. I was 3 months pregnant when I graduated from high school. I gave that baby up for adoption. I would later go on to be in 3 abusive and dysfunctional relationships. The second one brought me the one major joy in life, my son Anthony. I vowed to keep him and break the cycle of abuse. The important thing is that I have survived just about everything there is to survive in my life. I don't have chapters, it seems. I have books. What I have presented to you today in regards to my grandfather is just a sample of what I went through. My grandfather has been gone for what will be 2 years this October. Well, actually 3 years in October of this year. I cried tears of relief and joy at his funeral. Relief I was able to speak my mind to him during his last days of semi-lucidity, and joy that I was finally free of his physical presence here on earth. My biggest issue at this point in my life is that I'm still very insecure, and I still have a lot of self-doubt. I have to really work and remind myself daily that I am worth it and that I do deserve to be the person that I am today. One major success story that I have through everything that I went through is that when I was a teenager, or when we were teenagers, we had to do granddad's driving test before we could go get our driver's license. And I knew for myself what granddad's driving test was going to be like for me, getting out on a country road and nobody around. So I decided that me getting my driver's license when everybody else did was not worth it. I didn't get my driver's license until I was 27 years old. And at that time, I got a learner's permit and a handbook, and I studied it up and taught myself how to drive. And I did get my license officially. So that is my big takeaway for that. If it had not been for Deb Brown asking me to speak at 140 Conference Des Moines, I don't think I could have had the courage to speak out about this very painful part of my life. Twitter and Facebook and blogging have given me the outlets to speak out about this. Additionally, small-town America is not immune to these horrible life events. For some reason, there is a mentality that it can't happen in our town, or that it only happens in the city. I encourage all of you to watch for signs of child abuse. Don't be afraid to stand up for a child. You could be the difference in an abused child's life. I wished I would have had someone there to notice me and help me get out.